Hello, this is Andrew with Mammalian.bike. Maybe it's because I'm 49 and male, but I have been seeing a lot of ads for HRT or hormone replacement therapy lately, although it's not really labeled that way. For men, we call it TRT or testosterone replacement therapy. These are essentially the same thing, we just use different language for men and women. Probably because when women do it, they are going to replace multiple hormones, where for men, it's usually just testosterone or something that stimulates testosterone production. I'm going to call both of these HRT because that's what it is, and the fundamentals are pretty much the same. I have also been seeing a lot of videos and other endurance athlete targeted content which labels people who use HRT as dopers. I haven't read or watched all of them, but the ones I have are missing a lot of the nuance around this topic. So I thought it would be good to get into some of that nuance because there's a lot of misinformation out there. Misinformation and ignorance is a disservice to us all. Before getting into it, we need to lay down some basic groundwork for the discussion. If you use HRT and compete in events with testing and restrictions around what you can use, and you don't have a therapeutic exemption, that is cheating. It's hard for me to see it any other way. This is pretty black and white. If we want to call those people dopers, I have no problem with that. That isn't most of us though. Most of us just want to feel okay, be healthy, have strong bones, and not get dropped on the group ride. There is a difference between physiologic and super physiologic HRT. I am in no way defending super physiologic HRT. This is a distinction that is often missed in the doper content. Physiologic supplementation, where the amount added to the body only gets you within natural observed levels, is safe, effective, and has minimal side effects. If safety is a concern that you have, for men, I'd say go look up the Traverse study. And for women, Peter Attia has an excellent discussion with Dr. Rachel Rubin, an expert on the topic. I will put links in the description to both. This is just a small sample of the mountain of science which indicates that HRT is safe and effective at physiologic levels. I'm happy to discuss this more, I just don't want to get too bogged down in it here. I am not dismissing the potential for side effects with physiologic supplementation. Nothing is free. I am not advocating that anyone do HRT blindly. I am not a medical doctor. This is not medical advice. The goal is more to explain my thoughts around the topic and how it relates to people like us after having done significant research into this area. Super physiologic supplementation, where we take the levels over, and in many cases well over natural observed levels, is potentially dangerous. There isn't much science around this, so it's hard to say for sure. The only reason why you would want to do this is for performance reasons. Think bodybuilders and Lance Armstrong. I don't think this is a good idea, but I also don't think it's cheating as long as you're not competing in clean events. Lance was a cheater. I would say that someone doing this is clearly not playing the same game as someone supplementing to physiologic levels or not supplementing at all. If you're here, there's a good chance that you care about your health. Since you care about your health, it is critical to understand that HRT is not a substitute for lifestyle. We need to exercise. It doesn't need to be that much, 2-3 hours a week. It's totally fine. Lift, cardio, core. We need to manage our weight. The best way to do that is with your diet. Let's talk first about women, because that's easy. According to YouTube, only 0.2% of you are female. I expect that the other 99.8% of us don't know this stuff. I didn't. I had almost no understanding of what women go through in their mid-40s and beyond. I had almost no understanding of what my wife was and is going through. We are about the same age. This is actually how I got started researching the topic. After educating myself, it makes me angry how little attention is paid to the experience of women as they go through perimenopause and menopause. Every woman will go through that. It blows my mind that we don't have better science and treatment options around something that will happen to 100% of 51% of the population. It blows my mind. During perimenopause, a woman's hormone levels are all over the place. When they hit menopause, they just drop off a cliff. We all know that women have estrogen and men have testosterone, right? We all know that estrogen mostly goes away with menopause. I learned that in high school. We aren't taught what that means. We aren't taught the whole story. We aren't taught about how devastating that is to women's bodies. It's shameful. Both men and women have testosterone and estrogen. Unsurprisingly, They pretty much do the same things in our bodies. Women actually make more testosterone than they'd make estrogen. I didn't know that. I also didn't know that estrogen has a massive protective effect on many systems in the body for everyone. Bone health, joint health, urinary tract protection, and cardioprotective benefits, just to name a few. When the estrogen goes away, these systems take a massive hit. This is one of the reasons why older women develop osteoporosis. This is why many women in their late 40s or early 50s experience joint problems like frozen shoulder, or as it's commonly called, 50 shoulder. Supplementing estrogen and progesterone, because you need to do that when supplementing estrogen to prevent cancer, seems like a no-brainer for most women. It is a massive help for bone, joint health, and urinary tract health. But those women also clearly won't be playing the same game as women who opt not to do HRT. Does that make them dopers? Does that mean that they shouldn't be allowed to compete in master sport? I think that's a tough argument to make. I think it's ridiculous to say that in order to compete, you need to accept brittle bones and UTIs. I don't accept that. I think whether a woman does HRT is a personal choice, and it is not completely without risk. You shouldn't have to make a choice between long-term health and competitive sport. But the women who do HRT are not playing the same game as those who aren't. They will be able to train harder. They will be more resistant to the risks of athletics. It's a lot easier to run and ride the bike when your joints work. It is a lot easier to train when your bones don't break. It is a little murkier when we talk about men, or more specifically, testosterone. Women also benefit from supplementing T. They would generally do it at about 10% of what a man might target, but it has the same benefits. Testosterone is a steroid. It just happens to be a steroid that your body, all of our bodies, can make. When your body isn't making enough testosterone, there are some pretty bad symptoms associated with that. Fatigue, brain fog, difficulty building and maintaining muscle mass, mood regulation issues, depression, loss of libido, ED, and an increased risk of prostate cancer. All but the last two can impact everyone. It is a legitimate medical condition that impacts a person's physical and mental health. There are things that you can do to boost your testosterone. We already talked about them. Exercise, be a healthy weight, eat a healthy diet. These tenets help your health in many ways. Lean body mass, better mood, reduced type 2 diabetes risk, etc. They also help here potentially because they directly boost testosterone. You can think of it as a beneficial cycle. For example, muscle is a sink for glycogen. It helps regulate blood sugar and insulin response. Normal testosterone levels enable you to build and maintain muscle mass. One of the reasons that many postmenopausal women develop type 2 diabetes is because their hormones, all of their hormones, fall off a cliff. But for some men, lifestyle isn't going to be enough. They will need to supplement if they don't want to experience those symptoms. That feels like a legitimate medical condition that should be treated to me. I don't think those people should have to choose between being healthy and being allowed to compete either. This is a place where it is more complicated because men don't fall off a hormone cliff. Every man will experience a decline in testosterone, but not every man is going to decline outside of physiologic levels. The men who don't have an advantage in health and competitive athletics. I think that's great for them. I'm sure we all know and envy some guy like that. I haven't been able to find a solid number for how many men will decline into treatable deficiency levels. From what I understand after digging in, is that it's something that hasn't been well studied. The best guesses that I found are around 50%, but it's probably more. Should we deny care to those men? Should we deny them access to competitive sports because they want to feel normal and reduce their health risk? I don't have a definitive answer for that. I don't know that there is a good answer. I don't know if there is a fair answer either. It's complicated. I do know that I wouldn't characterize physiological supplementation as doping because it is a normal level that someone they are competing against naturally has. I do know that I have asthma. I take 2 different targeted steroids, and I don't eat dairy to manage that. I carry a rescue inhaler with me every time I get on the bike. Doing these things only gets me to normal. The only people that I have an advantage over are those who also have asthma and don't manage it. Everyone else is in the same place as I am. They just get there for free. They don't have to worry about it. They get to eat dairy. I miss cheese sometimes. It's also somewhat personal because I fall into that 50% of men group. I have experienced several of the symptoms of low T for a few years. I didn't know that these were the symptoms. I thought TRT was for bodybuilders and guys like Lance. It never occurred to me that this could be a driver for some of the things I'm experiencing. It got to the point this year where I started looking for medical answers on my own because my GP wasn't helpful. I found out mostly by accident because as I was filling out the labs form, I figured, why not have my hormones tested as long as I'm there? Then I had a second round at a different lab to make sure it wasn't wrong. They both show the same thing. My pituitary is asking for more T, but the factory isn't filled in the order. At this point, I haven't done anything besides exercise, weight management, and diet stuff. But it is something I'm considering, not just for symptom management, although I am tired of being tired all the time, but because all of the men in my immediate family have had prostate cancer. My uncle died from it. There is a genetic aspect to these things. Even though my dad made it through, the treatment was really rough on him. I would prefer to avoid that. And of course, the whole dying thing. It is something that I'm conflicted about. In many ways, it feels a lot like the situation with my asthma. We don't generally judge people or exclude them from sport because they like to breathe properly. But there is room there for abuse. The active ingredient in my rescue inhaler is a PED. Chris Froome got into some trouble there. I have a strong preference for avoiding pharmacological solutions where I can. But like my asthma, where I didn't receive proper treatment for most of my life, I wonder if this will be another area where I look back and feel incredibly stupid for not fighting harder for a solution. I missed many games because it was cold or damp, or I went anyway and ended up on the sidelines, my lungs on fire, in pain, gasping for breath, all because I accepted the don't exercise in the cold guidance from my GP at the time, or didn't chase proper medication on my own. I regret that. I regret not taking appropriate ownership of my health and well-being. But it's not an easy decision, mostly because once you cross that line, after a year or two, it can be difficult to undo that decision. I'm glad that we have the options that we have. I'm glad that HRT for everyone is becoming more acceptable. I do wish that there weren't so many sketchy T clinics popping up. That feels like a poor solution that may create backlash. It's definitely a regulatory problem in the making. But these are probably an artifact of the level of care that most GPs provide around the topic. My GP was quick to dismiss the symptoms that I mentioned to them over the years. They provided no useful answers to my complaints when I raised them, probably because they weren't severe acute medical issues. They called the first round of blood work that I had done on my own spurious and refused to take action around it. I haven't shared the second round with them because what's the point? The large medical groups don't want to do the easy early things to prevent problems. Those things are probably harder to get covered by insurance. We want to wait until they're big problems. It's not the doctor's fault per se, it's an artifact of how these companies and the insurance ecosystem are run. I did my blood work out of pocket. I didn't ask. It wasn't that expensive. Even if I do nothing with it, I feel like it's better to know than to not know. Where I live, there has been a rise in concierge medical groups. As far as I know, this is a trend in other major metro areas as well. In some ways, that's awesome, although it is difficult to determine their quality. There are a lot of horror stories around a la carte medical care, but it's not equitable. It's a solution that's only available to those who can step outside the traditional medical insurance system. I realize that this has gotten off topic and a little rambly, so I'm going to call it there. Hopefully you found it useful. I would love to know your thoughts around it. Leave a comment, shoot me an email. I'm happy to discuss further. Cheers.